Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for making this really interesting and thought-provoking session. I'm Mandy Charman, Senior Manager here at the Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Welfare. And on behalf of the Open Team and the Centre, I warmly welcome you today. First of all, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we're all meeting on today and pay my respects to elders past and present. Feel free to put in the chat the lands that you are on. That's always lovely. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us. First Nations communities have modelled collective care, accountability and child-centred decision-making for tens of thousands of years, and their traditions continue to guide the work we are all part of. So OPEN, the Outcomes Practice and Evidence Network run by the Centre, is a sector-led network connecting knowledge, research and evaluation to strengthen practice and improve outcomes for children, young people and families. We work to translate evidence into practice, support sector evaluation and learning, and create spaces like this one, where practitioners, researchers, young people and leaders can collectively explore what's working and where we need to push further. Today's session is a real treat, and I know this myself, but also can see evidence of this in the number of people that are registered for this session. So thank you for that. It is part of the Family Violence, Sexual Violence Knowledge Project, delivered in partnership with the Centre, No to Violence, Safe and Equal and SASVIC. We'll share a link to the Knowledge Hub in the chat if you haven't seen it yet, where you'll find research, resources and practical tools relevant to your work. So on to the important topic. We know that the term all the family is frequently used in our service system. Although infants, children and children at risk are often the reason that services become involved with families, once high levels of risk are identified, their voices are usually not prioritised. Infants and small children are not just passive observers. They can give us so much insight into how the family functions through their bodies, their movements, their vocalisations and of course their play. Paying attention to this can pave the way for opportunities for parents to reflect on their own experiences of trauma, become curious about parenting choices of previous generations, and consider how their choices might be understood by the children in their future. For our session today, we will hear about an infant and child-led therapeutic family model of practice in which key practitioners in various fields of practice partner with a specialist to support families through a single session or a brief therapeutic intervention. Working alongside the worker and family, the specialist helps bring the infant's and child's non-verbal communication, play and behaviour into focus, inviting everyone to pause, wonder and better understand the child's lived experience and what they're communicating. Today, with the opportunity to be guided through this approach by those who have developed and delivered it, exploring both the practical realities of the work and the research underpinning it. Together, these perspectives demonstrate how practice, knowledge and research can inform and strengthen infant-centred practice. So now to introduce you to our speakers. We have Dr. Wendy Bunston, who will be known by many of you. She is a social worker, family therapist, infant mental practitioner and senior adjunct lecturer at La Trobe University. Wendy is joined by two wonderful key workers. Walenska Perino, registered play therapist, FPR operations manager at Melbourne City Mission, and Caitlin Kempson, children's practitioner from Macaulay. Thank you so much for making the time. After hearing about this practice experience, we'll then hear from researchers at La Trobe University, whose evaluation of this approach provides valuable insights into its implementation and impact. They will share the key findings from their research. We're pleased to welcome Professor Marguerite Federico from La Trobe University and Principal Research Consultant at Berry Street. And Dr. Maureen Long is an Associate Professor as well as a qualified social worker with extensive experience in the delivery, design and development of programs in the child and family welfare sector. So first to Wendy, Walenska and Caitlin, thank you so much for being here to share your knowledge. Before we have put forward that you will be presenting a case study on the practical on the ground ways this plays out for various parents and families and children. I know everyone would be very keen to hear that level of insight into the daily operation of this important approach. But before we get on, just to ensure that everyone understands what we're sort of talking about, would you be able to just provide a brief overview of what the model involves and when it might be used? I'm going to hand over to Caitlin.
Yes. Hello. Hi everyone. My name's Caitlin, and I'm from Macaulay. I'm a children's practitioner at in Refuge with Macaulay. I've sat in consultations with Wendy with mums and toddlers to young adults, so a very like wide kind of range of people. So when I would refer to Wendy, it would kind of be in a situation where there's a lot of complexity within the family, and that kind of requires more of a specialist intervention because I'm not a therapist or anything like that. So sometimes some themes that come up can be beyond my scope. Um, Maybe there's a significant communication breakdown, a rupture in attachment due to family violence. Often we see like people using violence, undermining the child relationship with the mother, um, or a need to understand the impact of family violence on children as well. But I'm very much led by what the mum thinks is best at the time. Sometimes a consultation isn't appropriate. Yeah, that's kind of when I would refer. Other reasons
Um,
too.
um, in engaging Wendy, what is the importance of your continued presence in the consultation, in the session?
Um, yeah, well, I think one of the things that I've kind of seen is that I already have, so before Wendy comes along, and we do a consultation, I already have a relationship, a rapport with the family, and in particular with the children. I've played a lot with the kids and I've had chats with mum. So the fact that I already have a rapport with everyone, that can kind of speed along the process. Often Wendy will, during the first consultation, she'll say something like, why am I here? And she'll look at me and kind of prompt me to say like why we're all here today. And that can kind of create a good opening prompt to what we do together. Yeah.
Um, would you have particular insights into the benefits this process has for families?
Yes, there's many. I wish I had hours, but I don't. Um, but one of the things is I think the mums in particular, like I've seen them have more of an insight into their children and what their children are thinking, feeling, and experiencing, more understanding in their story and the impact of family violence. And often family violence is intergenerational as well. Wendy will use a genogram as kind of like a tool to map out a family's kind of story. Um, and yeah, so I think that's one of the key benefits is just everyone has more of an understanding and themselves. I do recall, I don't want to waffle, but I do recall one time I went for a walk with a young person after a consultation, and we were talking about the genogram, and they were kind of saying that they didn't know all these things about their family history, and that helped them kind of understand more about themselves. So yeah, and for me, I've developed more skills as a practitioner as well by seeing Wendy um, do her stuff. She's very good.
Before we move on to just a little bit more exploration of the benefits that you've gained, genogram. Could you just describe what that is a little bit?
Yes, Wendy would be
Does that?
better at it.
Oh, no, but you're here now and Wendy can jump in.
Yes. Um, I guess I don't know if this is the technical way to say it. I'm not a very, technical person, but I kind of see it as like a family tree in a way. Like You have the family, and then you have all the different relationships. Like you have the mum, and then the parents, and then all the relationships that are within that kind of family structure and how they all relate to each other. And then Wendy will kind of, when different people come up in the genogram, will ask questions about that person and kind of, I see it as a prompt to ask kind of curious questions when she keeps expanding on the genogram. I don't know if that makes sense. But
It
yeah,
sounds like a
I haven't
valuable.
done, I've only done one genogram before in my life, so I'm not an expert at explaining it, but that's kind of how I've seen it be done.
It clearly had a big impact, though, for you to be able to
Yes,
remember it.
yes.
So did you want to describe in a little bit more detail the benefits you've felt that as a key worker you've got from these processes?
Yeah, I think I touched on that it's helped me develop my skills. In terms of like asking really creative and sometimes direct therapeutic questions. So that's been great for me. The other thing is that I've seen how Wendy really brings children into the space. So often children can be like, put to the side a little bit, but they have a voice as well. So they're very much included in the process. And that's also, for me, helped me become more um, mindful about not thinking too much like an adult. Sometimes I need to think more like a child, if that makes sense. And because that actually helps you understand children a lot more. So, yeah, those are some of the things that's, yeah, for me as a practitioner that have been helpful.
Yeah, sounds really impactful. We want to hand over now to Walenska. Did you just want to say a little bit about yourself, Walenska, and your role?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, as you mentioned before, I'm Waleska or Wally. I'm a registered play therapist and also a team manager in family services at Melbourne City Mission. So I work in the FPR program, soon to move over into restoring families. So we're a therapeutic sort of case management service that works with families around building parenting capacity. So all of our families have CP involvement. And are either in the process of reunifying with their children or looking at sort of preserving, having their kids sort of remain in their care. So yeah, very sort of intensive work. So it relies heavily on case analysis and looking at setting goals that are going to sort of help the family move forward. So I guess, yeah, we've got to sort of try and tap into everything that we've got in the 200 hours or 6 months that we have for working with families.
At what point, as a key worker, would you identify that you or a family would benefit from this sort of type of specialist consultation?
Yeah, so generally, what will happen is about 5 to 6 weeks after engaging a family, we sort of do a bit of a review, and that's an opportunity to look at what are the needs. And sort of being a therapeutic case management service, we sort of need to take a holistic sort of view on things. So generally in that moment, we sort of might look at, okay, what are the barriers for the family in sort of progressing with their goals? But more importantly, I guess what's sort of happening in the dyad, so in the parent-child relationships and the family systems. And that's when we might sort of think about getting Wendy in to sort of unpack some of the family's own experience of attachments, their own sort of experience of being cared for. Some of our families have been in out of home care themselves. So it's really hard to sort of give what you've never had. So it allows an opportunity to sort of integrate their experience, but also, like Caitlin said, put the focus back on the child and recognize that we have a little person in the room that is on their journey, and we will sort of want to make changes and sort of set out for early intervention. So that's when, yeah, Wendy would sort of come in and do all of that work, the genogram, as Caitlin described, and sort of unpack all of the history.
Yeah. And quite often a history that they might not be directly um, directly conscious of themselves in terms of its impact on their their approach to parenting and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So much of it is about, I think, finding that window where families are starting to sort of, make comments or say things in home visits that might sort of give the practitioner insight to, okay, now's the time to sort of, jump in and do that piece of work.
Yeah. Sounds like it's deeply compassionate work too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why wouldn't you just refer the family onto a therapist?
I think a couple of things there. I think on a practical level, it's waitlist. It's really hard to get families into therapy. And I think when you work in the trauma space, so much of it is about jumping in an opportunity and keeping it sort of organic. So sometimes we have, and for long-term sort of piece of work, when families are ready and motivated, yes, they can wait the wait lists and things. But on another level, I think it's, seeing an opportunity. So often we might sort of sit in these review meetings or in supervision. And like I was saying before, there's a window for the work to happen. And it's about sort of getting at the right time. So we will then sort of reach out to Wendy, sort of make that happen. The other thing I think that's different in relation to maybe sort of more traditional therapy is the setting. It's really important that our families feel safe in the process. There's a lot to unpack, but also when you're working in the parenting space, there's a lot of shame, I think, that, comes with being involved with child protection and understanding that, maybe you didn't have the best start in life. And then it's really hard to sort of, make those reflections around your children and their experience. So having someone like Wendy that can come out into the family's homes and then use the relationship with the therapist to do that work is something that we don't, I think, see in traditional therapy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And did you want to comment on sort of the importance of the key worker being present at these sessions with the family, which is one of the features that makes it also different from sort of traditional therapy as such?
Yeah, I think the one of the things for practitioners, I think it's a real privilege to be a part of a therapy session for a family, and not something that, is generally the design for many sort of programs. So I think there's that. There's the privilege of, listening into these sort of deep experiences and the reflections. But the other thing I think too is that we're there at the start of the work and then we're there, during the therapeutic intervention, but the case managers are there after Wendy as well. So all of that insight and all of that richness from these sessions, then the practitioners are able to bring into supervision, and together, with my own experience and things, I can sort of help them set goals that are going to be achievable and maybe more in line with what the family's history is and what's actually going on for them. So another way to, I guess, explore what are the barriers. And, we talk often about meeting clients where they're at. But part of that, I think, is about considering their journey as well.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And so what effects for the infant and their family might you observe when families have been involved in this direct infant-led sort of approach?
I think for the family, it's about reflecting on what a lot of the feedback that we get from, the adults, I guess, in the room and the adult clients is that they're often asked about their history in a way that is really organic, and truly about sort of holding space, and getting them to think about things that maybe, they hadn't thought about before, or that hadn't been asked in a way to just sort of sit in that discomfort and hold. Generally, I think for a lot of our clients and their experience, when they are asked about their history, it's for assessment purposes to then either set goals or be used sort of against them in sort of, it's so much sort of analysis and sort of back and forth. So they do, which is why I think it's so important to have that sort of safety in the relationship, because our parents often don't open up because of what the fear of what their answers or what they say sort of might lead, especially our families, because they've got child protection involvement. So I think, they often will reflect of like, it just felt really nice to just sort of be really open. And I think, Wendy's very sort of relaxed and sort of casual in the way that she approaches the setting. So it's refreshing, I think, for them. And for the children in particular, I think, you know, and I sort of say this with a play therapy sort of lens as well, is I think we underestimate what kids can tell us and show us with their behavior. So I think they also get an opportunity to shine in the space, and to just have people that are delighting in them and observing them and listening into their story. And I think recognizing them in this journey as well.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. So how does this work in practice? You sort of mentioned the possibility of talking about some specific examples. So can you step us through an example of a family you've worked with, or a couple of examples, to describe what the sessions involve?
Yeah. Should I can go first.
Yeah.
So Wendy and I have worked obviously together. I've been at Melbourne City Mission for a long time, so we've got lots of examples. But I think one that sort of really sort of stands to mind, and I think we've used before in presentations, is a mum and dad that sort of came into our program. Generally just to build parenting capacity and mothercraft skills. But as we know, then you sort of start the work and you sort of start to hear about their history and their own upbringing. And then we quickly realized that both these parents had significant trauma histories. And I think what had brought them together was a little bit of trauma bonding, and then have found themselves as really young parents, caring for this little girl. And a lot of their reflections were around how do you sort of work through your own stuff whilst, trying to break the cycle for your own child. So we had lots of sessions where, yeah, Wendy sort of just brought the focus back to their daughter, and just, yeah, so much watching her in the room, and kept saying things like, what do you think she's trying to tell you? Or if she could answer that question, what might she sort of say? And that really sort of shifted the focus of the sessions around, you're already doing so much. You've maybe just not had the opportunity to reflect it in this sort of way. But then I think eventually, yeah, the sort of sessions played out, and they sort of came to their own conclusion, didn't they, Wendy, that maybe together as a couple, they weren't going to survive, but that they could be really good co-parents and still kind of meet her needs.
I was wondering that's really interesting in terms of even just the journey that they probably started not expecting that was the journey they were going to take. And I suppose I'm wondering about the tools and the approaches in the moment that might be used to take people on, both to notice what their young person or their little person is saying, but also to confront some of this sort of their own meaning making around that, and wondering what are the specific things that occur in the moment that, Wendy, you might do, or that jumped out at you, Wally and Caitlin, that were really noticeably sort of something new that you wouldn't have thought of before. Why don't you start, Wendy? It's hard when you're being polite with each other. It's so lovely, but
if you saw us in real life, there would be little politeness and lots of play. My response to that is that, well, I'm going to go back a couple of steps and then I'll come to what you're saying. But I think what I get to do is, if you think of like American baseball and you're sliding onto the last, I don't know what it is at the last one when you do the home run. Basically, what I see, I get to do, and I would invite other people who are therapists to think about working in this way, not in their office, but coming to the family. But I would say I get to slide onto the final, whatever it is that you do in baseball, and make the home run, because these guys have done the work before I get there. So these guys have already built up trust with these families. And then when I walk in the door, I obviously need to prove that I'm a trustworthy and compassionate, caring person, but they've done the hard yards. So I just sort of swoop in and do the other stuff. So I wanted to just acknowledge that I wouldn't probably get to go as quickly as I can if it wasn't for the work they've laid the foundation in. Two, I think it's using the genogram not as a prescriptive tool, but as a therapeutic intervention. And my genograms, and I think these two could attest to it, look like dog's breakfast. They don't look like, you know, what it does at uni or whatever. They look, I could show you one now, but it's got people's names on it. But it's just like, it's all over the shop. But it isn't meant to be used for the purpose of the genogram. It's meant to be used as a way of actually unpacking an intergenerational story that's of interest to this family in a way they've maybe never done before. And I'm thinking of the family Caitlin was talking about, where the young guy in the session was fascinated with the genogram, and he asked, could he take a photo of the genogram, because there were things that happened in that session he'd never heard of before. So I think it's a really powerful way to work, not to aim to get a genogram, but as an instrument to opening up discussions about one's history and the story that precedes these families, and even inviting them to think about, if this genogram continues into when these children become parents, what might this look like, and what do you want it to look like? So it's a really fabulous way to have a scaffold for a way of thinking about things, but not to be prescriptive. And then it's the third thing for me is like, and I'm just thinking about a session that Caitlin and I had recently, where the little person in the room was very interested in looking outside to the other units in the refuge, and was pretty cute and coming back and forward and nicking their phone and doing all sorts of things. And then he started, because I was really trying to engage him too and being playful with him, and he started to come and tickle my ankles under the table. And it's not just say, oh, I go in, I'm going to do a genogram. You go in and you be in the space. And this little guy was gorgeous. And there was some interesting dynamics happening between mum and the older sibling, where it was almost like the older sibling was mum's partner as opposed to her older child. So the older sibling was doing lots of parenting and stuff with the little fella, which was interesting to reflect on in the space and be curious about that. But also I was doing some play with the little fella. So it's also, and this is where I think Waleska would, you know, she's really taken this on as her profession, is that you have so many beautiful, potentially playful moments that occur in those spaces, and you're working with traumatized families that have got very poor ideas about playing. So if you know, I'm in my 60s now, if I start to play and I get on the floor or do whatever, sometimes I think these families are like, who is this nut job? Which is fair enough. But it's also that stuff of, you're not just collecting information, you're making it a therapeutic encounter where special things happen. And I'm very attuned to whatever pops up as a possibility in the space to take advantage of it. And I know in this last session, I had a little, you know, a $5 little bangle thing that I got when I had my hair cut. And this little fellow was really interested in it and had a smiley face on it. And I ended up giving it to him as a, like, and you just go with the flow, and you be in that space in a way that perhaps these families have never seen a so-called therapist or whatever be like. And I would invite a whole lot of people who do this work to be playful and to be in the moment and be, you know, just enjoy people, and to be able to observe what you see in the space and observe and give back to the families, not just their story, but give back what you see. This little boy was gorgeous. Like, he was really funny. He was really cute. He was really funny. He's a little bit naughty, but that's cool. Because you don't want a kid to not be a little bit naughty, because that tells you something different if they're just too well behaved. So yeah, it's really amplifying in a maybe 1-2 hour session, a whole lot of stuff that the minutiae is happening right in front of you, but if we don't capture it and amplify it, it gets missed. So I think there's all sorts of opportunities for all sorts of people who work in the therapeutic space to think about coming into a space that these guys have built the foundation. You slide in and you get to do all this stuff, and you slide out, and it's a pretty cool job to have, I would say.
Caitlin, did you want to comment from your perspective? And I suppose I could just imagine the look on these parents' faces because you were talking before about shame and about having professionals come in and almost sort of fix, this sense of whatever. And I could just imagine the revelation potentially of just having someone respond to their children in that way, even. Is that something that you've observed? What have you observed?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if I think it's related to what you just said, but I think with the family that Wendy was just talking about with the little boy and the mother and the older child kind of having a interesting kind of parent relationship in a way, was I remember that session towards the end, Wendy was we were all just having a lot of joy around this young person, and he was kind of the center of the session, and we were playing like games and I guess like Wendy was like offering her reflections and I was giving a little like some feedback and reflections and things like that. But I think for that family in particular, like sometimes they would reflect on how it would be a bit annoying when that young person was doing these types of behaviors or being like doing that and like, come on, come on, come on. But then like it was just cool that all of us ended up just having all of this joy with this young person and celebrating, his like uniqueness. So I think that was something that was, yeah, cool. I don't know if I answered your question. I think I did in my own way.
You absolutely did. It really captured the
Yeah.
gift that
And
this is that these families deserve.
yeah, and I
Like,
think yeah, definitely. And I think as well, Wendy's approach is very like personable. She's very relaxed. She's a therapist, if you know what I mean, not like a stiff person where it's like, let's talk about feelings and da da da. So she just creates this really relaxed space. And the feedback I've gotten consistently from families is they really relate to that. They don't want someone who's a doorknob, you know if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. He's sort of transactional too, because I mean, this is an additional sort of layer because you do have things you need to get through too. And I suppose I was sort of interested in um, in how somebody coming to this and wanting to sort of really sort of lean into these ideas a little bit, what would be the ways that you would suggest they could start introducing this type of thinking, if you think about even when you started doing this?
I would argue you don't have to get through anything. So I don't think it's an outcome-based intervention. It's just a therapeutic exchange. So it isn't like now we've come up with this, the goals are to do this. That's not how it works. It's like unpacking I was going to say a box of sweeties, but it's not always sweet what you find. But it's unpacking something and you do it in a way that's incredibly respectful of their experience, that you enjoy them in a way that maybe they haven't always felt enjoyed. But this is where I think these guys have already built that relationship because, I'm maybe biased, but these are my two favourite agencies. Like, I just think I've worked with them for over 20 years each, I think, and I just see the value base, the sort of workers they attract. They're down to earth, very highly skilled practitioners, and they're just real. So I think it offers the families an experience of practitioners who are very, very skilled, but also very, very real, very compassionate, really respect and honor the people they're working with. Like, I think it's an honor to work in this sector. It's not an honor for them to see us, although It probably is to some degree, but it really is an honour for us to work with these families who've had intergenerational trauma and are still standing.
Yeah.
So they have as much to teach us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it also shows families that there's different ways of like doing therapy. I think often sometimes, you know, we think that there's only one way, or when workers talk to families about engaging in therapy, it's often sometimes like met with resistance. And I think this gives families a really refreshing sort of way of doing like their sort of inner work. It sort of lets them know that there are so many ways that you can meet your own needs and your children's needs, and that, yeah, therapeutic work doesn't have to be linear. It doesn't have to be one particular way. I think it's just about picking your moment, finding your moment, and being integrative. And that's what I think is really nice in the space and for practitioners as well. Because then they walk away and they're like, I'm already doing so much of that. And it's really helps them sort of trust the process that, yeah, if you're authentic and, you know, you do really good use of self, that you can offer a lot more than you think.
That's so powerful, Wally. It's just been lovely listening to you, and I know everyone could keep listening as we go through the afternoon, actually. But we might take this moment just to start our next little mini part of this session, and then hopefully we'll still have 5 minutes at the end to have some questions. Thank you very much. So we've heard quite a lot of really rich discussion about the practice model in action, and now we just want to move to hearing about the research which explored how this approach influences practices to benefit works and families across the work. So we've started with a deep dive and now we're sort of lifting up. The study explored how participation in the infant and child-led therapeutic model that we've been hearing about influenced the practice of key workers and drawing on the perspectives of key workers, program managers and families. So we want to welcome Marguerite and Maureen to get us started. And in the interest of time, could you just briefly orient us to the study and then take us through the key findings and what they mean for practice? If people are interested in further details of the method, it is described fully in the paper that was been recently published in Children Australia. So certainly we'll put that paper in now if you haven't happened to see that.
Thank you. I feel like this is the kind of sort of you've done sort of the peak discussion about what was like. This is probably not quite as exciting as hearing actually from Wendy and the team about the actual practice. So, but Wendy was really keen after, as she mentioned before, she's been doing this work for about 20 years. And what she wanted to know was what works. And so Wendy, Margarita and myself developed a research study to look at that. We got ethics through La Trobe University, where Margarita and I are employed, and Wendy, as she mentioned at the beginning, is an adjunct. So there were 3 key questions that we looked at. How do workers incorporate, and you've already talked quite a bit about that, an infant and child-led approach into their practice without risk families following their participation in direct infant and child-led family therapy consultations? How does this experience enhance or change the way they practice? And what effects for the infant and their family do workers observe when families have been involved in direct infant-led family therapy consultations? Okay, so we did a thematic analysis. What we need, I probably need to say that questionnaires, surveys, online anonymous surveys were sent out to all the agencies where Wendy had been employed delivering this model. So it was survey-based, most of the, and we also had some submissions made to us by managers in agencies where Wendy had delivered the service. So Wendy, Margarita and myself met here. We're at the La Trobe City campus today. We met here and we undertook a thematic analysis of the survey. So we noted 3 key themes to emerge: the infant and child focus, changes in workers' approach, and then the increased skills and knowledge that the workers were able to identify. So what we're going to do now is just really note some feedback actually from participants. So So in regard to the infant and child focus theme, these are comments from survey participants. So exploration of relationships going back to how parents, and both Caitlin and Waletzka have already identified that's the importance of really understanding the parent's trauma as well and how this impacts. I feel much more confident in how to engage with the children and the families I work with in therapy sessions. Having the child in mind and the child version of the adult in mind, unpacking patterns that occur within families, to actively ensure that the child is always the focal point and is always in the room, even if they may not physically be in the room. So they were really key responses from the survey participants. I should have said at the beginning that the survey participants were workers who'd actually participated in the consultations with Wendy. So they were talking about their experience of being participants in this process. So changes in workers' approach. I spend more time gathering an in-depth understanding of a parent's childhood, exploring what they believe is a good parent, and helping the parent understand that their parenting can be reflective or a response to their own childhood experiences. I think this has already been highlighted in the discussion earlier. It changed my approach to being child-led rather than mother or father-led. Children reflect things that are a window into what is going on, enabling me to reflect and ask questions that explore relationships and where they started, which has given me insight into dynamics and trauma in families. So again, how the consultations had influenced practice going forward. And what were the skills, increased skills and knowledge that workers identified. Listening to Wendy, tease out the family dynamics individually with the parents, and then making the baby their focus was really inspiring. It was a great learning process to be present in the room, to observe firsthand how Wendy uses herself to facilitate each family member to contribute to the family story, even the reluctant family members. Wendy regulated authentic presence, transfers to those, a presence that was aware to all those around her, allowing space to challenge and be curious within and out of the client's window of tolerance. So not just the experience of actually being in the moment with Wendy when she was conducting these consultations, but the importance really of what workers picked up from those experiences and took with them going forward. And I mean, that's really the essence. And so just finally, we had some feedback from agency managers. So it was the agency managers who recommended the consultations, and as well as ensuring the funding of the consultations. So this is some of the feedback we received from a couple of the managers. They said their focus was to enhance their workers' skills, which they said had occurred. They wanted their workers to work therapeutically with families without actually being the therapist, to understand that relationship building is sometimes the key to unpacking trauma and empowering a family to seek help. They also felt that noting that families with whom they were working had intergenerational trauma, the managers wanted families to be given the best opportunity to get the help and support they need, and not just another service that does not meet the family's needs and ticks boxes. So they really wanted a service that would engage and support the workers to engage more with families, and understanding that relationship building is sometimes the key to unpacking trauma and empowering a family to seek help. So that's really just a snapshot, as you've already identified, Mandy. The paper is available freely online, so people can to read more. If there are any questions, happy to take them. Mark, did you want to add anything? Wendy, do you want to add anything to that?
I would say, like, it's sounding very Wendy based, and I would say that basically, I guess what we do in society is we hold in high regard sort of established institutions about how you do things, which is fine. It's good. It's good that we do that. But there are multiple ways of working, and I know are practitioners out there on the ground who do brilliant work, and you've got two of those practitioners here in this session right now. And I guess I would encourage other people who have an infant mental health family therapy background to sort of think about forming collaborations with agencies like Macaulay and like Melbourne City Mission that do really brilliant on the ground work. Perhaps don't get the acclaim that some other services get, but I know that they do brilliant work because I've been working with them for so long. I know they engage with really hard to engage with at-risk families. So I guess I would, as a sector, encourage us to sort of think about how we can be more creatively available to be infant, child, and family-led, and to not expect families who are going through so much and are really disadvantaged so many ways to get to the office of therapists, but to get therapists to go to agencies and to families where if you can bring yourself to those spaces, you can do some really lovely work. You can build on the work that these guys have created, because there's no way I would get to go in and do what I do unless these guys have set up the foundation for it in the first place. And I don't know, maybe it's good that they're not seen as like the superstars of the sector because they quietly go about their business and they get some brilliant outcomes. But I guess there's a part of me that as I get towards the end of my career, I'd really like to give a shout out to these sort of services that are just brilliant, do brilliant work, are incredibly infant and child focused. And I guess invite the sector to sort of think about how to be a bit more, maybe a bit less anal and a little bit more flexible, playful, real, not have to have so many professional rules about what it is you're supposed to do, and just be real with these families who've been through so much and are really brilliant families because they've survived enormous trauma. I don't know if I would have been able to do what some of these families have been able to do.
Yeah. Is it Marguerite or Maureen that have got your hand up?
Thanks. Thanks, Maddie. And because I also saw a question come up in the comments just about therapeutic approach. And I think it really, to me, highlighted the importance of the infant-led approach. And it's something that, Wendy, you have developed more, but that very much to me underlines it. I agree, it's all the good work that's occurring, but really a focus on that infant-led approach. And I just wondered if a little bit more could be said about that, because that to me is what a major thing in making a difference, including respect for families, but that all comes into that infant-led approach.
Look, that would for me be based on having the opportunity to be trained in infant mental health with people like Frances Thompson-Salo and Campbell Paul, who are really brilliant advocates for the voice of children and the subjectivity of children and infants. So I guess there's sectors. I mean, I guess I could see there's different groups that could come together more and do brilliant work together. And even the fact that I had access to you guys and you didn't even hesitate to say, yes, you'd help me do this. So I guess what I'm talking about is there's so much goodwill in the sector. I mean, Maureen and Marguerite are being very well behaved, but if you saw them off screen, they're very naughty and fun. And I guess there's something about that realness of just being real with the people we work with and just recognizing that how we engage with the client group that we engage with, it's like, I think they teach us as much as we might be able to offer them.
Yeah. It goes without saying that there's lots of lovely comments in the chat talking about aspects of this and sort of agreeing and sharing their own experiences. I suppose just to finish up, throwing it open perhaps to Caitlin and Waleska, what would your recommendations be for practitioners who might be new to this way of working? What could be 2 or 3 top tips that they may be able to include in their own thinking about their work from your experience?
I don't know if I can think of 3. I'm distracted. I can hear children right now, like screaming and like and that's kind of prompted me with my answer. Just to not be scared to like be really playful and silly, even with mums. I know that that's just me. Just being yourself. Obviously there's boundaries, but like kind of Wendy was talking about, yeah, don't be afraid to just loosen up a little bit and just be a human being. I feel like when you're like that as a practitioner, people connect with you more. They're more likely to be open and share their stories with you, and then you can support them better. So I think just be a human being. That's my number one tip.
How deep and
Yeah.
true is that? Bring
I
the
don't have
joy.
3. I probably do if I had more time, but I know we don't.
Wally, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a play therapist, I echo that as well. I think, play is the language of children. So why not, engage in play and yeah, just bring a lightness, I think, about yourself. It definitely reduces the stress and the nerves in the environment. But I think the other thing that I would highlight is just because something is not the way it's normally done doesn't mean it's wrong. I think so much about, how these things come about is just trying something different. And I think it lands sometimes. Sometimes you try something different and it doesn't go well at all, and you learn. Clients are very good at telling you when things have or haven't landed. But yeah, just because it's not the way that it's sort of, usually done doesn't mean that it's wrong. So I think for new practitioners, especially that sort of, come in fresh into the sector and with so much hope, I think for, making change, like ride that wave out, I think, for as long as possible, because I think it taps into your creativity and different ways of doing things. Yeah, don't be afraid to, I think, like suggest things in supervision of like, how would this go? What if we tried this thing out? Because yeah, I think it's like we've been saying the whole time, like the work is not linear, and sometimes, yeah, stepping out of your comfort zone and getting creative and being a bit silly, sometimes it lands and it's really powerful.
And you were asked the question of who would you recommend read play therapy, like training?
Deacon, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of play therapy sort of, workshops and things out there, and they're great to sort of tap into, definitely, as a way of like building your skills. But I think if you really do have a passion for play therapy, I mean, I could be biased, but because I did my play therapy masters at Deakin, but it would be something I would really recommend. Yeah, it changes the way you view kids and their experiences.
It's so fascinating and frankly inspiring and energizing. I feel thoroughly energized. So thank you so much for your sharing. Thank you for everyone for attending this wonderful session. Hopefully we'll hear more about this great type of work. Before we finish, I'm sure our presenters would be very happy if you wanted to reach out to them separately after the event. So I would imagine as presenters, I'd love that. Before we finish, if you are interested in further opportunities to support your child-centred practice, we've put some slides up. So please register for those if you're interested, and have a wonderful afternoon.